Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Data Protection Gumbo. And I'm Demetrius, your host. And we have a great and fantastic guest lined up for you today, where we will dive into cybersecurity and also some ways that you can continue to safeguard your business from a lot of the evolving threats that are out there. And I insinuate the word evolving because things are shifting and changing as we speak. And so I'd like to welcome and bring on Nathan Whittacre, who is the CEO of Stimulus Technologies. Welcome to the Gumbo, Nathan. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Demetrius, and happy to be here.
Awesome. Good to have you on. Can you start off by sharing the story behind Stimulus Technologies and also what inspired you to focus on cybersecurity?
Sure. So it's a long story, but I'll keep it brief because we've been around for 29 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I was working in a computer shop, and this was back in 1995. The owner of the shop decided to close it down because he wanted to focus on his teaching career at University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And so went home to my brother and my dad and said, "Hey, we can do the same thing." And we decided to start a business, just doing IT support, building computers for friends and family, and some of the customers that were left without a place to go at the computer shop that I was working at. So it started in my brother's garage in 1995, and we've since grown quite a bit since then, obviously. But over the years, we've evolved from that break fix IT service model to a full managed service provider, managed security service provider, and offering full range of suite of services to take care of all the technology needs for our company. We operate in 5 states now and have about 75 team members across those 5 states. So from my brother's garage 29 years ago to all over the country, it's been a journey. And your question about cybersecurity, it's an essential part of IT infrastructure to work on cyber and the security needs of businesses. The IT services and cybersecurity go hand in hand because there's IT infrastructure we put in place to make a company function well in today's world, whether it's email, data storage, cloud hosting, cloud services. But we have to protect all of that infrastructure to ensure that they can continue operation. We see those attacks constantly of big to small businesses, and about 5 years ago, we moved into offering a complete suite of security offerings to keep businesses safe.
Well, I appreciate you sticking with it and taking that small shop to the next level. Not all of us are that brave. And so, in order for you to kind of continue that on is a great service, and to also hire others and bring others on, especially in today's market, because it's a bit challenging right now. And I also want to bring up your book here that I purchased on Amazon. And really, I have not had a chance to read the entire thing, but just to pull out a couple of points here. And just one in particular was around you talk about some of the various digital threats. And I want to know, for the listeners here, what are some of the most surprising cybersecurity threats that you've encountered?
Some surprising ones. We obviously all know about like social engineering attacks and business email compromise, ransomware, things like that.
Hmm.
I think, those aren't surprising because they're constant, and, the hackers are always trying to get into our infrastructure. One thing that we've ran across recently that's kind of interesting is attacks on cross site, and maybe getting a little complicated here, but cross site tokenization. So if you,
Yeah.
for example, register, let's say you have a Google account and you use that Google token to register for a different website, there are some new and creative attacks to potentially get access to your data in Google maybe that cross-shared data is accessible if the other site is compromised, or maybe the other site is not as secure, or the site that you think it is.
Hmm.
The other thing is if you're using tokenization with Microsoft 365 for single sign-on, all those API connections add up, especially in large enterprises. If the users are allowed to, integrate their systems, whether it's single sign-on or credential integration, there's now a connection between that third-party application and Microsoft 365. So there are some potential attacks that have been, that are in the wild now around that integration. So,
Hmm.
those are just very novel, and it's just another way into the system. So, there's just constant evolving threats, and these hackers are, obviously thwarted by a lot of technologies of companies are implementing endpoint detection, managed detect and respond, whitelisting, things like that. There's a lot of protection in place. And so they're having to find different ways of entering into organizational infrastructure.
And you've seen and had conversations or have conversations with maybe hundreds of executives, and also, let's say, CISOs and those that are responsible for keeping their organization's data secure. What are some of the most common mistakes that you see in an organization, whether it's small, medium, regardless of what that size is? What are some of the mistakes that you see that could be maybe remedied easily? And that's a mouthful for me. So
I
exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot, and most of the issues are surrounded around users and what the capabilities the users
Okay.
have.
Hmm. Hmm.
In we often see, especially in small to mid-sized organizations, for ease of use, companies will give maybe power users local administrative rights on their individual machines.
Hmm.
And or administrators that should have administrative rights on the network are always using their administrative account. So I think of an example recently that we discovered how the attack happened here in Las Vegas. The MGM Grand attack was because the help desk team had a social engineering attack launched at them that got the credentials and two-factor authentication reset for a network administrator for their regular user account. And that network administrator had administrative rights across the network, and they were able to get into the rest of the infrastructure because of those administrative rights. And so, that issue of having too much power of your local user, I think, is a common problem that we see. And I think, kind of along those same lines too, is not having standard, security settings across an entire organization. If you're going to turn on, for example, multi-factor authentication, you need to make sure that it's enforced across your entire organization, even
Okay.
for the CEO, because executives, they want easy access into their systems, but they're often, the worst ones at security because, they want to move quick and they want to, have access to whatever they want. And so that we see that, that enforcement isn't in place across the entire organization. So, things like that. I mean, I could go on for a long time, but it's
Yeah.
just it's basically making sure that your security posture is enforced across the whole organization, that you're, especially if we're talking to administrators, network administrators, IT administrators, that they're not using, global administrator accounts or just general administrator accounts across their network for their daily use, that they're only logging into those when they need. And I think there's some other things that we, kind of going back to that MGM attack of, maybe implementing one-time password or just-in-time password management systems so that a lost credential can't cause a catastrophic event like what happened to the MGM, that
Hmm.
there's a rotation of these credentials constantly by just-in-time password management. So there's a lot of new techniques that are out there to prevent these type of attacks from occurring.
So you said new different types of techniques. Does that mean that artificial intelligence is playing a better role, or maybe a larger role, in organizations' overall security posture, and kind of increasing the posture and making sure that they have that comprehensive security strategy in place? Are you seeing more companies utilize artificial intelligence, especially when you're talking cybersecurity?
Certainly. And, if we look at the vendors that are out there, whether it's a company like Sentinel One, for example, or these managed detect and respond endpoint detection systems,
Mm-hmm.
they're having to implement AI to detect AI generated attacks. And I think that's the problem. This is a discussion online, even on social media now, is how do you detect like a deep fake, for example, whether it's a picture or audio, whatever it may be. It's almost impossible for an untrained eye to detect a picture that's AI generated, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to fight against these AI generated attacks with AI generation to detect, or AI systems to detect those type of attacks. And I think, what we're seeing now in the security world is, it used to be to launch a social engineering attack against an organization, an individual would have to go on to, LinkedIn or on Facebook or one of these sites and gather a lot of information about an executive or somebody that they want to do a spear phishing attack against. But now with AI, they can just say, hey, I want to target the CFO of XYZ corporation, gather all the information on this person, and then write me some emails that would be effective on targeting this CFO.
Mm.
And that is an AI generated social engineering attack, and it's really hard for an individual to detect that attack because there's so much information that seems legitimate, from the person. So it's kind of an interesting thought, and kind of,
Yeah.
it's very scary, right?
Yeah, it really is. And just to shift on you a little bit here, I am looking at the external cybersecurity checkup. And of course I'm in your book here. I've gone to the
Yeah.
book.
And thanks
And
for
I
grabbing it, by the way. Appreciate it.
yeah,
Appreciate it.
yeah, you're welcome. I love the format and how it's laid out, and I can actually read the words with my old eyes here. The font is great. And so looking at this external cybersecurity checkup, give yourself a score of 1 to 3 in each area, add them up to see how you did. And there's a few areas of concern. One here is I have reviewed and understand the SLAs by all my service providers, and they comply with my expectations. And then you also have a few more, but one more just to name it here. I've implemented methods to detect and prevent DOS attacks against my systems. And so you add those up and then you get a score. This whole checkup, right? What's the importance of companies and organizations having a checkup, and what's the frequency of this checkup?
That's a great question. So, we look at security posture, and it changes all the time. AI, we were just talking about it,
Hmm.
is a new phenomenon in these type of attacks. And I would recommend organizations, the executive team of an organization should work with their CIO, CISO, at least once a year to do a full review of their systems and ensure that they are up to speed. I mean, just on your last question on the DOS attack, that supposedly, that Elon Musk and Donald Trump had a discussion on
Yeah,
X, right?
right.
An interview not too long ago, and it was delayed by 30 minutes because of a DDoS attack. Now, a large organization like X, I'm sure, is always under attack, and they're probably constantly doing things to mitigate against that. But it's certainly something to constantly be looking at to make sure the systems are in place, especially if you have like such an event like having a presidential nominee coming on there and maybe millions of listeners. So
Mm.
no fault against them. I'm just saying that whatever size organization you have, there's constant new threats that are out there, and having that checkup and that discussion. And I think the executives of the organization should be asking their teams the questions, not just, hey, are we good? They should understand enough to ask some detailed questions like, we have this business plan, this business idea that we're doing. We're planning on having a town hall meeting, or we're planning on launching this new ERP system,
Hmm.
or we have this new website that we're launching. Ask your CISO, ask your CIO, do we have the capabilities of protecting that? Or do we have sufficient bandwidth or sufficient resources to manage this system across the organization? So the executives have to make sure that their technology is aligned with their business strategy going forward, and that's what these assessments are about.
And I am also curious as well around, how can, let's say, C-level executives and business leaders in IT, especially, foster a culture of cybersecurity and also cybersecurity awareness within their organizations, just to make sure that there's a top-down approach coming from the top of the food chain all the way down, because typically things won't get done unless it comes from the top. Because if it's just an administrator or an engineer at the bottom, they're doing all the work. Typically, it won't stick, right? What are you seeing there, and is there any advice that you can give as far as overall cybersecurity awareness from a C-level perspective?
I think the word that you used in the beginning of the question, the culture, I think is essential.
Hmm.
So you can have an initiative, you can have a program, you can have a software package, training materials, whatever it may be, that you do once, and you say, oh, everybody's trained. But until you actually make it part of the culture of the company, that we have a strong technology posture, we have a cybersecurity aware culture inside the organization, nothing really changes. And
Hmm.
so it's got to start from the top down, like you said, that the CEO and the executive team of the company has to be all in that concept, and they have to be the example across the whole organization. We often see companies that that the CEO is maybe disconnected from the technology because it is complicated,
Hmm.
right? The
Yeah.
thing I spewed out tons of acronyms in the last 20 minutes that we've been talking here, and a lot of executives have a hard time keeping up, and it just sounds like the teacher from the Peanuts show, and it's very difficult to stay up to speed, especially the executives want to drive their business in the vertical that they're in. They're great at being a manufacturer, or great at being a healthcare provider, or great at being an accounting firm, whatever
Hmm.
it may be. And but technology is such a part of the long-term business strategy. It's changed so much and changed the way that we do business,
Yeah.
especially in the last 40, 50 years. I think it's important that the executives are integrating technology leadership inside their cultural values of the company, and being the leader of it, understanding enough that they can have the conversations, understand what's being talked about, and making sure that those initiatives are going across the entire organizations, and being the leader of it.
Okay.
That's how they stick.
Yeah, yeah, and I mentioned earlier that I know you've had, and you're having lots of conversations with companies and C-level executives. Can you share maybe a success story, or maybe even a case study where stimulus technologies has kind of jumped in and helped a business overcome a significant cybersecurity challenge?
Sure. So we deal with a lot of businesses of various sizes, from small businesses, 5 to 10 employees, up to enterprises of hundreds of employees. I think of an example. We had a healthcare services group that was struggling. They had a few internal IT staff and an external consultant that was helping them out. And they just had a number of challenges inside their organization, more from a usability standpoint of their IT infrastructure, because it was overly complicated. There was a lot of IT initiatives that have been executed, but not fully completed over many years. And their teams were frustrated with the technology not working always correctly. So what we did as a company, we came in there and did a full assessment of the organization. We spoke to, the executives, understood what their frustrations were, but also a lot of the departmental managers and supervisors to understand business processes and where they were failing through the IT systems. And then we developed a roadmap for them, everything from, changing out and completing some of these IT projects that they had that hadn't been completed, migrating data over to new systems. And part of cybersecurity, I think, is also ensuring system uptime, backups, redundancy across the network. That's an essential part of it, is ensuring, that if there was an event, that we have those solutions in place. So we were able to implement new solutions to ensure that if there was a disruption because of a cybersecurity event, that they had proper backups in place. And, over a short period of time, 6 to 8 months, we were able to, dramatically change and solve a lot of problems that they were having and improve their employees' lives, because they were able to be more productive. The systems were running smoother, and they had a lot of resiliency and redundancy in their networks that they didn't have before. So it just takes putting a plan in place and executing properly on that plan, because we see a lot of IT initiatives that get started and they don't get completed. And I'm sure all of you have seen that before. We're going to implement this new software package or put in this new server or move to this cloud system, and it kind of goes halfway, and then people, I like the old system better, I want to use the old system, and you kind of have these these redundant or multiple systems working, and nobody knows which way is that. So that's one of the great success stories that we had, and there's a number of others. We've worked with over 600 companies over the last few years. Actually, that's just over the last few years. We've helped thousands over our 29 years. But a lot of it is just implementing these right systems and ensuring that initiatives are completed and projects are completed and they're done right, and then they align with the business strategy that the company has.
Yeah, and I guess as companies continue to migrate data from on-prem into the cloud, things will get a lot quicker, faster, right? You can scale on demand. There's so many different pros, and there are also some cons as far
For
as
sure.
moving workloads into the cloud. There's also some security benefits, but you also have to be careful as well. Some of those switches that you have to make sure that you have checked, that you are not leaving buckets open. And I mean, it's just a whole long list of things, especially when you start to think about the shared responsibility model as far as what's your responsibility, which it's your data. So you need to make sure you're protecting your data, but the infrastructure and everything else that's there is definitely taken care of by the provider. One piece of advice before I let you go, maybe 30 seconds. What piece of advice would you give to someone out of a job right now, and they've been looking for 6 months, not able to find one? You got a piece of advice for them?
I would say if somebody is, in the technology sector that's looking for a position, all the hotness right now is in AI. We talked about it a minute ago.
Mm-hmm.
There's some great training out there, and companies are really looking for people that have some type of expertise in AI, even if it's this, minor as, prompt generation, all the way to, API and, data scientist type work, but be able to understand, how to integrate technology and AI and business systems together will upmarket you dramatically. And I think businesses are looking for that. So even a certificate or some type of training will make a huge difference in your job search.
Awesome. And so I also want to bring up, if you are a CEO out there, then please go to Amazon or wherever your book is offered. Nathan here, the CEO's Digital Survival Guide. So go pick it up. I can't wait to continue to dive into the book myself and gain some insights. I'll have it here so I can refer back to it when I need it as well. And also, everyone out there, please go check out the YouTube channel that we have, dataprotectiongumbo.com. And also, we do have a LinkedIn group out there. backup and recovery professionals with 26,000 individuals in there. So cybersecurity, storage, backup, compliance, privacy, even blockchain. We're having all different types of digital conversations within that group. So Nathan, thank you so much again for being a guest here, and we appreciate it.
Thanks, Demetrius. Appreciate it. And thanks for listening, everybody.